Hello and welcome to Auckland Airport, and after a wonderful weekend here of travelling around, I'm going to head back to Sydney to go to work and pay for more of these flights. Now I came across on a Qantas 737, but I'm going back in the 787 Dreamliner, so it'll be interesting to compare what their business class products are like on their bigger aircraft. So let's go and check in. Auckland is New Zealand's largest airport, and up until recently, Emirates used to do the trans-Tasman hop in 3 A380s. At Sydney Airport in particular, it was apparently cheaper to fly over to New Zealand and back rather than pay for 10 hours of parking on the tarmac. The A380s were the most comfortable way to cross the Tasman Sea, but now they've gone, with the exception of a single Sydney to Christchurch flight. I thought it might be interesting to explore the different business options across the Dutch. I'll also let you in on a few tips to maximise your experience, and at the end I'll be giving away a pair of Qantas business pyjamas. You can use the self check-in machines or head straight through to the business class check-in area. It was off to departures now after a brief envious look at Air New Zealand's brilliant premium check-in area. I've been through there once on another Air New Zealand flight, and I'll include a link to that video in the description below. Qantas flies 3 types of aircraft across the Tasman Sea. There is the narrow-body 737, which has the standard recliner seats in business, and then there are the 2 wide-body aircraft, the A330 and today's Boeing 787 Dreamliner. The latter 2 have proper international-grade business seats that fold completely flat and have direct aisle access. The flight is just under 3 hours, so you obviously don't need a flat seat, but it's nice to have one if there is the option. This area is the final place to say farewell before you go airside. There's a standard security lane on the left, although one of the perks of business is access to the express lane straight ahead. Next up, you're surrounded by the usual airport shops, and you'll just follow the pathway to get to the business lounges, which are up the escalators on the right. Now this is the first big tip. Qantas have a reciprocal agreement with Emirates, so even though they're not the same airline alliance, Qantas business passengers can use the Emirates lounges, and vice versa. Now I'll quickly show you into the Qantas lounge so you can compare the two and see what I mean. Now I should also point out that the Emirates lounges does close in the early afternoon, so you may not be able to get in anyway. Having said that, the Qantas lounge is still a pleasant place to be. There's a decent buffet with mostly cold options, although there is also a chicken and rice dish, which I'll show you shortly. There's also a self-serve bar, including some nice local wines. Now I'm often messaged by my American subscribers commenting that coffee is often too strong and it gives them the jitters. I can understand their concern, as these automatic machines don't really give you an option of how strong you want to make the brew, so in the spirit of the ANZUS treaty, I thought I would help out. Now what you do is you get 2 cups and fill one of them with coffee. Then with the other cup, you fill that with hot water. Now back in the privacy of your own table, you dip a spoon into the coffee and then carefully put a drop of that into the hot water, just like so. Lovely. And there you go, a strong coffee to open up the eyelids. Here's the rest of my lunch and a glass of Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand's famous Marlborough region in the South Island. As I've mentioned before, one of the perks of business lounges is access to clean showers. This is particularly helpful after a long flight, or a long layover in a humid city, or maybe you've just made a joke about Americans. Next up, I was off to the business lounge, which is right next door and is better in almost every way. Once again, they have the usual self-serve bar, as well as Veuve Clicquot champagne. They have a number of these cold snack plates, which I'll show you more shortly, and there's also a larger selection of hot options. After that coffee, I needed to calm down a little, so I poured myself a glass of champagne and lined up a few snacks. First up are Emirates signature dates, followed by beetroot cured South Island salmon, then a hot smoked salmon Nicoise style salad, and a spiced pear and almond tart. They all tasted great, although since I'd overeaten, I took off for a walk to do some plane spotting. As I waited for my aircraft to arrive, I saw this brand new Fiji A350. Now I made a video on this aircraft just 2 months ago, and I'll link to that below. And here's our aircraft, a Boeing 787-9 named Great Barrier Reef, which was only delivered brand new to Qantas in late 2018. This aircraft usually flies on the longer routes, including the non-stop 17-hour one between Perth and London, so today's 3-hour flight was just a short hop for it. In fact, this aircraft, as well as the A380, will make up the long-haul Qantas fleet for the next 10 years, although it may be joined by a third aircraft depending on what happens with the Project Sunrise ultra-long-range flights from Sydney to London and New York. The current Qantas CEO has mentioned that the brilliant A350-1000 is a preferred option, although no orders have been placed. Anyway, boarding wasn't for another 45 minutes, so I took off to do some more plane spotting. Now I really love this scene here where you've got an Air New Zealand 777-200 completely towering over a small Air Calian A320. The A320 isn't exactly a small aircraft, so it really highlights how large the 777 actually is. But of course, the biggest of all is the A380, which is just arriving from Singapore. Now, purely from a cosmetic point of view, it's not a great looker, but it's a brilliant piece of engineering and easily the most comfortable aircraft to fly in. By the way, I'd love to hear your thoughts on these aircraft. Do you agree with what I'm saying? Feel free to comment below. And just as boarding was called, another 787-9 pulled in next to our aircraft. Of interest, Air New Zealand were actually the launch partner of the 787-9, which they've been flying since 2014. And here we are on board with the main business cabin on the left and a smaller one on the right. The seats are all in a 1-2-1 layout, and mine, 5 Alpha, was on the left hand side. Now the window seats alternate between being more open and private, so that's worth considering when you're selecting a seat. And if you are travelling with someone, the middle seats might work better, and if you have to, you can lower the privacy barrier to have a chat. A glass of sparkling wine was brought around, and I'll run you through my seat in a little more detail. Above the magazine holders is a small coat hook, and in front of you is an adjustable touch TV screen. Under there is a reasonably sized foot recess, although I'll point out a few other seats later on that have more legroom. Above are individual air vents, which I really appreciate because I usually find aircraft cabins too hot. There's the usual fold-out table, which felt sturdy enough, and a large ledge next to you. And hidden under there is a mirror and an entertainment remote. As we continue on, there's a power plug and USB port, and headphones with an adjustable light. There's a bottle holder, and you can store stuff inside that ridge thing, and finishing off are the seat adjustment buttons. Now one of the light buttons does the mood lighting, which I think actually looks really good, while the seats does not have its own door. As you can see, it's still pretty private. I'll quickly point out that there are 2 seating options for takeoff and landing, so you don't have to sit bolt upright, which I think is pretty cool. Overall, it's a really good seat, although I'm not a fan of these windows. As you will have seen in previous rants of videos, while I do like the size, I dislike how the electromagnetic dimming draws out the colours, and they can be locked in the dark mode. I can understand it if people are trying to sleep on a flight crossing time zones, but not on a shorter day flight. Anyway, we backed out and took off for the runway. After waiting for this Air New Zealand A321neo to land, it was our turn to take off. The weather was clearing and we got some stunning views over the coastline, and while I will speed up some of this takeoff footage in this video, I'll link to the full video below. If you enjoy these types of aviation videos, I'd really appreciate it if you check out my channel and subscribed. I have many more similar videos on board aircraft, as well as tours through aviation museums and retired aircraft and major air shows. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, where you'll see many more views just like this one, and I'll update you on my most recent travel plans and bookings. Unfortunately, Qantas don't offer Wi-Fi on any of their international routes, so this millennial had to drown my sorrows with lunch. To start, I had this seared tuna with crushed peas, goat's curd, sesame, soy and balsamic vinaigrette.
This was washed down with a Sauvignon Blanc from the Marlborough region, of course, which was topped up once my main arrived. I went for this Korean-style salad of rare beef with soba noodles, egg, cucumber, and spiced sesame dressing, which all tasted okay, although to be honest, not amazing. For dessert, there was an option of ice cream or a plate of cheese with accompaniments. I was fortunate enough to actually get both, as there were some leftover ice creams. Now, I was impressed with how crisp the grapes were, although I must admit that just the ice cream itself would have been a little underwhelming for an international business dessert. This was all washed down with a De Bortoli dessert wine from the Riverina region in New South Wales. I'll give you a brief run through the in-flight entertainment. There's a decent selection of movies, unlike in the smaller 737s that also fly this route. There's also a fair few TV series, and they also have a reasonable number of episodes per show. As with most modern airliners, they also have this great 3D map, which I really enjoy using to identify significant places 39,000 feet below you, although admittedly, I didn't have much use for it between Auckland and Sydney. Otherwise, the touch feature was responsive and the screen was perfectly reasonable quality. As I had a night of video editing coming up, I ordered a coffee and biscuit. Oddly enough, they don't use the usual crockery on trans-Tasman 787 flights, so I had to make do with this Qantas branded paper cup. Well, look, it did keep the coffee in one spot, although I'm sure I've had normal cups on other trans-Tasman Qantas flights. Now, they usually don't offer pyjamas or romantic kits on these short flights, although I helped out with a minor medical emergency, so the crew gave me a pair. It was a nice gesture on their behalf, and since I've already got a pair myself, I thought I might give them away to a subscriber. To enter in the giveaway, just comment below including the text Qantas PJs in brackets, and in 1 month I'll randomly select a winner and mail them out. Just make sure that you've subscribed, you've liked this video, and keep an eye out on my Instagram and Facebook pages where I'll announce the winner. As I said before, the flight time was less than 3 hours, so we started our descent into Sydney after not too long at all. As we drop down through the clouds, I'll explain why I think it's now the best way to fly across the Tasman in business, and I'll include a few links to videos looking at the competition on this route, including Air New Zealand, LATAM, China Airlines, Virgin, and other Qantas aircraft. So, the aircraft itself is fantastic. Everyone gets carried away with how good the A350 is, and sure, it's a great aircraft, but I reckon it's only equal to the 787 from a perspective of noise and cabin humidity. The bigger A380 is still more comfortable, but they no longer fly between Auckland and Australia. This seat is really good. I think it provides a good compromise between being private, but also not being too claustrophobic. I'd say it's equal to the seat in the China Airlines A350, which crosses from Brisbane to Auckland, although the Qantas in-flight entertainment has way more options. Air New Zealand's business seat are an old design and need an update, while the old recliners in both the Qantas and Virgin 737s are also considerably less impressive. The crew on my flight were fantastic, with jovial and personalised service as I've come to expect with Qantas. Now look, I should also point out that Virgin and Air New Zealand also have very good customer service as well. What really did lack in this flight, and to be honest with you, this has been a recent issue with some Qantas flights, was the food. Look, it wasn't bad by any standard, although it really hasn't improved like many other international business products have. To be honest, I'd say that Virgin and Air New Zealand offerings are better in this respect. But overall, I still think it's one of the best trans-Tasman business class products, followed by the Qantas A330, which is essentially the same seat. As always, I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Please comment below, either agreeing or maybe disagreeing, that's fine. And finally, how to maximise this flight. Firstly, and most importantly, when you're booking the flights, select the 787 or the A330. There are way more 737 flights, but the seats is really not as good. Secondly, skip the Auckland Qantas Lounge and go straight for the Emirates Lounge. And thirdly, think about what seat you want. As I said, the window seats are staggered in a more private versus a more accessible options. So if you're bigger or maybe have limited mobility, obviously the less private seats will be easy to get into. Now, one criticism is that the foot recesses is quite narrow, but the first and 10th rows actually have more leg room, as you can see in this shot from another flight, so you might want to select those. And that's about it. Again, please enter in the Qantas Business Pajamas giveaway, and don't forget to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I'll also link to all those other videos in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you another time.